Welcome everyone. This is our second lesson in the topic. This is our second lesson on the topic nutrition, where we are looking at how organisms obtain food and use that food in their bodies. So in our first presentation, we looked at the different types of nutrition, and in this presentation we are going to focus on the nutrients. What are nutrients? The different types of nutrients. What do these nutrients do? Where do we get these nutrients, or what are the sources of these nutrients? And then what happens if we do not have sufficient amounts of these nutrients? So that is basically what we are going to that's what we are going to look at. So in human nutrition, we are basically looking at the science of food and how what we eat or what we have in our diet plays a role in maintaining our health. Okay, so if we don't have sufficient nutrients or sufficient food, we are likely to get health problems. Okay, we are likely to get health problems. So the study that is concerned with how diet or how food is related to our health is what we term as human nutrition. Okay, and so you can study nutrition and become what we call a nutritionist, and the nutritionist will be able to as a nutritionist, you'll be able to guide people on what to eat and what to eat in moderation, depending on one's health status and one's state of health. Okay. Now, when we were basically studying this, we focus a lot on what we call nutrients and how they are utilized in the body. So nutrients are chemical components of food that are very important for life and health. Okay, so we eat food, and why we eat that food is that we want to have energy. Okay, but we also derive a lot of other functions apart from getting energy. Okay, when we eat food, it means that our body will be healthy. That means when we have cells that are worn out, they can be repaired. If we eat food, it means that we can be able to grow. We eat food, it means that biological processes can be able to take place. Okay. Also, important biological molecules can be synthesized or can be made. So that means that the nutrients are very important for life and for health, and that is why we are emphasizing this. We're saying that nutrients are important for life and health. They're the chemical components of food. So when we buy, for example, we buy chapati or make chapatis at home. When we eat chapati, of course it is delicious, but it contains it has oil, it has the carbohydrates. Okay, these are the nutrients that we are talking about. For example, in the case of chapatis, so these nutrients are the ones that are very important. So it is possible that you have food that is having less nutrients, and then you have foods that have a lot of nutrients. So we talk about nutrient dense foods That means that these foods contain a lot of nutrients. And then we have those foods that largely are not having a lot of nutrients. Okay, you get nutrients from them, but the nutrients are of little. The nutrients are not that much. Okay, so the nutrients are important for all the other biological processes that I've talked about: growth, reproduction, movement, impulse transmission, and many others. Okay, so the nutrients are very, very important. So all the foods that we have around contain nutrients. Okay, some are nutrient rich, others do not have a lot of nutrients. They contain less nutrients. Okay, so the nutrients that we get from foods can be categorized into two: micronutrients and then macronutrients. Macronutrients with this MACRO, meaning it is actually, when we use the word macro, we are referring to the fact that it is actually large. When we use the word micro, it is something small. Okay, so macronutrients are those nutrients that our bodies require in huge amounts or large amounts. Okay, and for the ones that we are calling micronutrients, they are the ones that we require in small amounts. Okay, so the ones that we require in large amounts, the ones we call macro, are the ones that include carbohydrates, proteins, and then lipids. And then for micronutrients, we have vitamins and minerals. Okay? The vitamins and minerals are very important for different purposes or different biological functions. They are very important in keeping our bodies healthy, and we shall look at the different types of vitamins and minerals. Okay, so let's look at the proteins. So we are looking at the macronutrients now. The macronutrients, including proteins. So the proteins, I believe you're familiar with the fact that we usually say that proteins are bodybuilding foods. Proteins are bodybuilding foods. That means that our body, for growth to really happen, we should be having sufficient proteins. So the proteins, actually the proteins are large molecules that are formed because of a combination of smaller molecules that we call amino acids. Okay, so proteins are made up of amino acids. They are the building units of proteins. Okay, so if you have a protein molecule, when you keep breaking it down, you have a polypeptide, and then you have a peptide, and then you have an amino acids. Okay, so that means that you combine a number of amino acids to be able to get a peptide, and then you have to have many peptides combined to form a polypeptide. Okay, and then finally forming proteins. Okay, so amino acids, peptides, poly, and then the polypeptides, okay, polypeptides. These are basically proteins. So that is what we are saying in there. So the amino acids are building blocks of proteins. So we can say we have two types of proteins, or we can say we have two types of amino acids. So the types of amino acids are essential amino acids and non-essential amino acids. Essential are the ones that the body cannot make, but the body gets them from the food that we eat. And then the non-essential amino acids are those that the body can make, amino acids that the body can make. Okay, so we have two types there. So proteins, where do we get the proteins? We get the proteins from animal and plant sources. Animal and plant sources. The plant sources, beans, lentils, peas, walnuts. These are plant sources. And then we have animal sources, milk and the dairy products, milk and its products, okay, or dairy products give us proteins. And then we also have animal sources here, beef, chicken, fish, and termites. And then we have here the mushrooms. They fall under the kingdom of fungi. Okay, so the mushrooms, we can also still get proteins from the mushrooms. So those are the sources of proteins. So what do we use the proteins for? The body uses proteins for a number of things. Okay, remember the statement that proteins are bodybuilding foods. That statement means that if we are going to have growth happening, increase in size, we need to have sufficient proteins. If we get damage, we need proteins to repair the cells that have been damaged, or the cells that have been injured. So proteins are very important in repairing damaged tissues. Okay? And then we have what we call protein carriers. Protein carriers. These protein carriers are like they carry molecules across the cell membrane. So for example, if this is the cell membrane, you will have certain molecules that can cross without any problem, that can cross the cell membrane without any problem. And then we have certain molecules that will not easily cross the cell membrane, and what they will need is a carrier. So a carrier is a protein that will have a hole here that allows the molecule to move from one side of the cell to the other side. So we call these proteinous molecules. We call them transport carriers or protein carriers, or we can call them transport molecules. Okay, so that falls under what we call facilitated. There's what we call facilitated diffusion. Facilitated diffusion. I think the pen is not writing properly. Facilitated diffusion. That means that there should be a carrier to move these molecules across the cell membrane. And then proteins also form an important part, of the cell structure. The cell membrane actually has proteins. Okay, so the proteins are very important in terms of maintaining the structure of the cell. And then also you look at later on, you look at how muscles contract. We have proteins, we can call them contractile proteins. They are very important in bringing about muscle contractions. For you to move your hand, your leg, muscles contract. So how do muscles actually contract? Okay, contraction of skeletal muscles, singular contraction of smooth muscles. How do they contract? You realize that there are certain proteins that we call the contractile proteins, and we have examples. For example, troponin. These are important contractile proteins. So proteins are important for in muscle contraction. If we don't have sufficient carbohydrates, it is basically to say carbohydrates. If we don't have sufficient carbohydrates, we resort to proteins as a source of energy. Okay, that means that they can be broken down to release energy in the form of ATP. Okay, in the form of ATP. That happens especially when you don't have sufficient carbohydrates and also lipids. Then the body resorts to proteins for release of energy. So we have very many molecules that are made out of proteins. Okay, so starting, for example, hemoglobin, which is very important in transporting oxygen, is a protein molecule. Antibodies are proteinous. Enzymes are proteinous. So you can actually convert each of these into points. You can say proteins are important in carrying oxygen. For example, hemoglobin carries oxygen and carbon dioxide. And then you can say proteins are important in immunity because the antibodies help in fighting against pathogens. You can say proteins are important in regulating the rate of chemical reactions because enzymes are proteinous in nature. That means that the enzymes actually control the rate of chemical reactions. So some people need more proteins than others, especially children, pregnant women, and those that are actually recovering from illness. Okay, when you have been sick, it means your cells are worn out and you need to recover, recuperate. That means that you need sufficient protein. So that means your diet should contain a lot of proteins. So proteins are very important for those categories of people, including all the other people still need proteins. But these ones need them more because of the different physiological processes happening. So we look at the other macronutrients. Lipids. Lipids, by the way, lipids are like proteins. Proteins are like lipids because we actually call them organic compounds. Organic compounds. Lipids are organic compounds. Carbohydrates are organic compounds. And then also proteins are organic compounds. All of those have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Proteins have what? Lipids have that. Carbohydrates have that. Okay? So the difference comes in what additional elements do we have? Okay, what additional elements do we have? And in what proportion do they really combine? Those are the things that make proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids different. Okay, so lipids are compounds that contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Okay, but of course we have different. You can even have metals combining with some of these. You can also have proteins combining with the lipids, and different combinations. So this is not to say that actually all the lipids should have this. No, that is not what this actually means. This is not what it means. Okay, it means that for all lipids they should have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, but you can have other groups added, other chemical groups added to them. Okay, so looking at The lipids, we can say that they are categorized into two: fats and then oils. The fats are solid at room temperature, okay, and then usually room temperature is taken to be 24 degrees centigrade. So what we are basically saying is that if we have lipids at room temperature and then they solidify, those are basically fats. And then if we have them being liquid at room temperature, then they are oils. Okay, so the lipids are made up of fatty acids. Lipids are made up of fatty acids. Basically, the components of lipid, we have lipids, we have fatty acids and then glycerol. Fatty acids and glycerol. So the fatty acids have can be categorized into two: essential and non-essential fatty acids. Still relates to what we looked at in terms of amino acids. Those that are essential are made by the body. Those that are not essential, non-essential, are not made by the body. It's the same thing that applies here. So lipids play an important role. One is that if you don't have sufficient carbohydrates in your body, then lipids will be used for energy. Okay, the important part of the cell membrane. Remember, the cell membrane, we already talked about the proteins, but we're also saying that the lipids are important component of the cell membrane. The lipids are poor conductors of heat. We can say they're basically insulators. So they insulate against heat loss. Okay, that is one. And then two, that the important organs of the body are usually covered by fat, and that fat basically plays a protective role. Okay, but also having excessive fat on some of these organs is not good. Okay, excessive fat on the heart is not good. Excessive fat on the liver is not good. But we are also saying that the fat is very important in protecting these organs. So the insulation is very important. Insulation against heat loss here. And then we have some fats, some vitamins that are soluble in fats. We call them fat-soluble vitamins. So vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin K. These are examples of fat-soluble vitamins. So the body stores these vitamins in fats. That's very important to note. And then we have, just like we talked about the molecules that come from proteins, we also have molecules, important body molecules, important molecules in the body that come from fats, okay, or lipids. So they are very important for different roles. For example, what we call steroid hormones. They are made from, for example, components of what falls under lipids. Okay, and they play an important role. So that means that important molecules that play in controlling blood pressure and the immune response. Okay, if you are attacked by a pathogen, your body will respond by the immune response. Your body will initiate an immune response, and some of the molecules that play an important role in this are made from lipids. Okay, so we get lipids from still animal and plant sources. Okay, so we have oil that we get from fish, nuts, avocado, and then have the oil and seeds. Okay, sunflower, sesame, these sesame, these are very good sources. So let's look at carbohydrates. So don't remember, don't forget, they are organic compounds made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Okay, those are carbohydrates. They're the main source of energy. Okay, so that means that the energy that we use to do activities, physical activities, and even the energy that is used for biological processes is derived from carbohydrates. Okay, usually this energy is in terms of what we call calories. Okay, and we can be able to, if you eat particular food, we can be able to know the amount of calories that you get out of eating a particular food. So that the calories, basically the units of the energy that you get from eating a particular amount of food. The carbohydrates are very important for very many reasons apart from the energy. See that they are important in heart function, nervous system function, even kidney function. We have some sugars. Carbohydrates can actually be called sugars that are very important in forming part of what we call the genetic material. And when we talk about the genetic material, we are referring to the DNA and RNA. Okay? Excess carbohydrates can be converted into glycogen or fat for use in the future. Okay, so if you take a lot of food that contains carbohydrates, you are likely to become fat because the carbohydrates are being converted into fat. Okay, so you gain a lot of weight. So if the carbohydrates to be used for in the future, most likely you become converted into glycogen. Okay, and then when you have low glucose levels, the glycogen will be broken down to release glucose such that the glucose is now what is used. And just remember that when you break carbohydrates, you get different molecules. We have monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. Okay, these are different molecules of carbohydrates. Just like the way you saw with the proteins, amino acids, peptides, polypeptides. It's the same thing that we have with carbohydrates. You have monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. So under each category, we have a number of examples of monosaccharides, examples of disaccharides, examples of polysaccharides. But the key point that I want to refer to is that our body usually uses carbohydrates in the form of glucose. Okay, so when I talk about glucose, basically just know that it is the simplest form of carbohydrates. Okay, so we get carbohydrates from posho, from potato, cassava, Irish, fruits, vegetables, and even grains. Okay, rice, for example, all those are good examples of carbohydrates. And then we look at vitamins. Vitamins are still organic. Okay, they are organic molecules that are very important for growth and survival. Okay, we can say important for growth and health. So we can categorize them into two: fat-soluble vitamins and those that are not soluble in fats, and we call them actually water-soluble. So if you remember, vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin K fall under fat-soluble vitamins. Okay? Vitamin B and C fall under water-soluble vitamins. Okay? So green plants can make some of these vitamins. Okay? Green plants can make some of these. Green plants can make some of these vitamins. Okay, so let's look at the functions and the sources of some of these vitamins. So let us start with the fat-soluble vitamins. Vitamin A, you can get vitamin A from milk, eggs, liver, fish, dark leafy vegetables. Vitamin A is very important for vision, especially at night vision. So if you don't have enough vitamin A, you are going to have a problem with seeing at night, what we call night blindness. And then vitamin D is important for absorption of calcium, which is very important in bone health. Okay, so that means that if you don't have vitamin D, you're going to have a problem with your bones, and we shall look at that later. So you can still get that from fatty fish, egg yolk, fortified milk, cereals. The body can synthesize vitamin D from sunlight. That's something you need to note. Vitamin E is very important antioxidant. That means that it prevents some reactions from happening. These reactions that can happen within cells can result into problems, cell death and things like that, cell damage. So the antioxidants, for example, vitamin E, prevents these unwanted reactions that will damage the cell. Okay, so we get that from nuts, seeds, vegetable oil, green leafy vegetables. Vitamin K, very important for blood clotting and bone health. We get that from green leafy vegetables, fermented food. And then the water, vitamin B and C, because we have different classifications of vitamin B. So we have vitamin B1, B2, B3, B6, and B12. Okay, these are water-soluble vitamins. So vitamin C is also an oxidant, and I've just explained what oxidants do. We get them from citrus fruits. For example, the oranges that we eat contain sufficient vitamin C. Berries, kiwi, bell peppers, and tomatoes also contain vitamin C. And then we come to vitamin B1, which we call thiamine. Thiamine is very important in nerve function, transmission of impulses across nerves. Okay, and they are also very important in the process of breaking down nutrients to release energy, what we are calling here as energy metabolism. B1 is very important. We get it from lentils, beans, nuts, whole grains, and pork. Riboflavin is an important vitamin because it supports the process of generating energy. okay, and promotes good or healthy skin and vision. We get from milk, poultry, fish, and dairy products, including the green leafy vegetables. Niacin, very important in energy metabolism. So you can see that a lot of these water-soluble vitamins are very important in energy metabolism. And when you look at the processes through which these molecules, organic molecules, are broken down to release energy, you will see where they come in to play an important role in the release of energy. Okay, so that is niacin, which is vitamin B3. You get it from meat, poultry, fish, nuts, and whole grains. Vitamin B6, very important in protein metabolism, red blood cell formation, and brain function. Okay, and then vitamin B12, still red blood cell. So when we talk about red blood cell metabolism, think about vitamin B6, vitamin B12. Okay, they play an important role in red blood cell formation or metabolism. Basically, red blood cell formation, not metabolism. And then folate still is very important in the formation of DNA, which is genetic material, and therefore the DNA actually controls all the other functions of the cell. So it is very important also in cell division. That is folate. So actually, pregnant women are given what we call folic acid. Folic acid, because they need it. If they don't get folic acid, then it is likely that they can have children that have abnormalities. So folic acid is very important, or folate is very important in having children that do not have abnormalities. Okay? So what happens if you don't have sufficient vitamins? You get diseases. Some of the things I already talked about. For example, insufficient vitamin A, you have night blindness. Vitamin B1, beriberi, vitamin B3, you have pellagra, vitamin B6 and B12, you're talking about anemia, because previously we were basically talking about the red blood cells. So if you don't have enough red blood cells, basically that is anemia. So B12, B6, just know we are dealing with anemia. And then you have vitamin C, you get scurvy, vitamin D, rickets, vitamin E, it is very rare to get a deficiency of vitamin E. Okay, and then hemorrhage, continuous bleeding. You cut yourself and the blood is supposed to clot so that the blood does not flow. When you have deficiency in vitamin K, then you're going to have excessive bleeding because the blood cannot clot. So let's look at the minerals very fast. The body still requires a lot of minerals: sodium, chloride ions, potassium, calcium, phosphorus, and many others. They're very important for different functions. So let's go through this list very fast. Calcium, when we talk about calcium, think about the teeth and the bones. Okay, teeth and the bone, they're very important. Calcium is very important there. So if you don't get enough calcium, you have issues with bone health. Osteoporosis will happen in adults, and then rickets in children. Remember, rickets is also associated with vitamin D. So vitamin D and vitamin D and calcium and the phosphorus, these are actually related. So you need to know how they are related in terms of bone health. Iron, just remember issues to do with red blood cells. Okay, if you have less iron, anemia will happen because red blood cells contain iron. So if you don't have enough iron, you will not have very good red blood cells. Potassium, think about issues to do with muscle function. Potassium is very important in transmission of impulses, and that means that the ability of muscles to contract. So muscle issues will happen if you don't have enough potassium. Relatedly, potassium and the sodium are basically like very close in terms of how they work. So still the same thing, you get muscle problems because sodium is actually very important in impulse transmission, but also very important red blood cell, blood pressure and fluid balance. Iodine, you get goiter, the swelling that happens around the neck. The iodine is very important for synthesis of thyroid hormone, okay, thyroxine hormone. And then zinc, very important if for healing of epithelial linings. If a child gets diarrhea, they are usually given zinc to make sure that the lining heals. So it improves immunity and healing of the GIT hormones. And then magnesium, very important still in muscle function. So if you have deficiency, you get muscle cramps. Okay, so that has been our presentation where we looked at the two categories of nutrients that the body requires. The nutrients that we require in large amounts, carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. And then those that we require in small amounts, including the vitamins and the minerals. Thank you.